Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell. Today, our guest is Delegate Steve Arentz. Steve is a delegate, resides here in Queen Anne's County, represents District 36, which comprises Caroline, Cecil, Kent, and Queen Anne's counties. He's been a member of the House of Delegates since 2013. Among committees that he's on the Economic Matters Committee, the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee. Prior to that, he was also chairman of the Eastern Shore delegation from 2019 to 2022. Uh, Prior to that, he was president of the Queen Anne's County Board of Commissioners. He was also owner and operator with his wife, Biana, of the Hemingway's Restaurant and Lola Sunset Grill in Stevensville, Maryland. As anybody will know, when you cross the Bay Bridge and you saw that big Hemingway sign, you knew you were in God's country here on the Eastern Shore. Steve is also a real estate salesman along with his wife, Biana, and daughter, Elizabeth. As his advertisement says, his wife is fluent in Spanish, his daughter is fluent in Millennial, Steve is fluent in English. Hey, welcome to Gonzales Mitchell, Steve.
Thanks. I mean, the point that I'm fluent in English is questionable sometimes as I get excited about some topics. It's good to be here, Clay. Thanks for asking me, and thanks for having me on the show. I do miss Patrick. Wish I would have been here, and that would have been a good idea to have him here. But sorry, he's on assignment. So
Yeah, he's on assignment.
yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I guess, there's a lot. We got about 20, 25 minutes, as you said, and there's a whole lot to talk about. And I just want to get some opinions out there and some thoughts out there and some things. And
sure.
And I'll start off with the biggest topic that everywhere we go, we're getting hit with the budget. How could we possibly be in this condition? And we're in this condition. I think everybody knows. And I think Delegate Grice puts it properly. He says, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem.
Yeah.
And, the other part of this is over the years, people on my side of the fence in Annapolis have been fighting against the spending problem and trying to put caution out there to saying, you know what, at some point you got to pay the piper. And as you start doing things, you start seeing that when I add $1 this year that's mandated, that dollar soon becomes tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the situation we're in. And when I get hit with this budget problem, they say, what would you do? And I said, well, if you think about back in 2010, and when I got into being a commissioner, we walked into kind of a mess. We walked into overall deficit of the county of about 20%. And that's a lot of money. So we decided how would we accomplish that? And because I think I was a businessman and am a businessman, we were working for the county now. We're working for a lot of people, not just for my wife and I or my business. So we put together a group to sit back and say, what does the county look like if we cut 20%? And this is some of the things I think the governor should be doing, but it's a whole lot bigger than that because you have history here and you have departments that are so big. But he has to come back and sit back and say raising taxes isn't the answer because we're talking about bringing jobs. He's talking about we got to increase revenue. When your taxes are so high, people don't want to come here and do business. And regardless of the fact that we're right next to Washington, D.C., that well will run dry because people are finding ways to work in different circumstances. So that's going to be something he's going to have to take a very hard look at. And you mentioned earlier, I sit on the Joint Audit Committee, and I've been on that audit committee since my first day I got into General Assembly. When I got in, I was I was appointed to the Appropriations Committee, which was a real eye-opener, even though I think I understood what dollars and cents means. But when you look at what we've done over the years and you start looking at the audits and stuff, I'm now the only member on the Joint Audit Committee, as far as my side of that committee, not the Senate side, that has been on this committee since the day I've been on there the longest. So I've sat through all of O'Malley's audits. I've sat through some of Hogan's first audits. Now I'm sitting through the second show of Hogan's second audits. And one of the things that's most glaringly consistent is we see the same problems over and over and over and over again. We see lack of accountability across the board. And we had a hearing not 2 months ago with, I think it was Do It. And I'm listening to the audit and I said, did anybody ever think that maybe we really should take a look at this thing we do called appointing secretaries and appointing me as the secretary because I can spell something farming and you want to make me, or I don't want to go farming because I really like that secretary. But if you
Right.
go into that, you sit back and say, we need to appoint people that actually understand the business thoroughly, because people don't want to run a government like a business, but you have to do that. You have to sit back and say, I make a difference, and here's how I make a difference, associated cost to that. But when I did that, I got criticized, and like I was criticizing that secretary. I said, but you have to understand, when we go through these audits, we're listening to you just blaming on the last secretary. That's all we do. The secretary was terrible. He was appointed by this person, or she was appointed by that person. So that's where the problem lies. And that's clearly not where the problem lies, because you're only one person, you're a secretary. And we try to say that, well, what's happening underneath that? Because we changed that big person at the top. And when I was a county commissioner, I can remember distinctly, I went in and I had an issue with an employee, and they said, well, first of all, you can't fire me unless you have just cause. And I said, you're right. I said, and Stephen, in 4 years, you'll be gone. And I'll just be back to doing it my way, or the other way. And I sit down and say, that's not what we need in government. But when you start look at the millions and millions of dollars that are out there, and you're saying, how does this happen? How are we letting this go? How is it you come to me and tell me what you need after all these years we've been in business? You need procedures written. There's one we had one audit, and it's not an exception. It's out there all the time, where when we have payroll, we had over 154 employees, ex-employees, okay, that were still on the payroll for a minimum of 10 to 860 days. How does that happen? You know, you sit back and say, if I work for somebody, if you work for me and you quit, I just go on the keyboard and say, you're off. And that's not happening, because there's no checks and balances. There are checks and balances, but it doesn't matter. It's not my money. So we watch a lot of that happen. You know, we look at places. I just saw this weekend in the paper, Frostburg University, they're going to go through so many cuts, and they're trying to trim their budget. Well, a month or so ago, they were in front of the audit committee, and you listen to the problems they were having with, they can't do a contract right. They can't actually, when you bid a contract, they didn't follow the processes that are recommended, not necessarily the process demanded. And you sit there and say, how is it that I have an educational institution, because we did this with Frostburg, University of Maryland, and the University of Maryland Global Campus. And I says, you all teach a business degree. How can you do this? And then you get it. Well, it's real though. I mean, this is me whining, but I sat back and I said, you know, we're already in a jam. We're listening to people tell you we got to pay for college. But what we're doing is we're sending kids out there with a huge amount of debt, and they can't get a job to even begin to pay that off. So what does that say to you? And I said, do you ever think that maybe you're selling an inferior product? That if I can't go out and pay for that thing over a certain amount of years, there's a problem with that. And we don't want to look at those things. We just want to keep doing business as usual. So Frostburg's going to go through a lot of staffing cuts, a lot of cuts on some things, and yet the regular business part of it's being something we're not necessarily doing as well as we could. So those are a couple things. Go ahead. You have a question.
I remember when I was in government, when you develop a budget, it was just sort of, you take a look at every line item from last year, and you submit a new one with all the same line items, with a little bit of an increase to adjust for costs or whatever. There's never this, I think it used to be called zero-based budgeting, where you take the whole budget down, you start from the beginning, say, what do I need this year? Because sometimes you don't need what you needed last year. Now, there's certain things like computers need to be replaced and that sort of thing, and I get that. But there needs to be a different system. And I don't know if it's regulatory. I don't know if it's needs a change by the legislature, where the budget requesting process is a bit different. A lot of the cost, as you say, is salaries. But if you have people that are being paid that aren't working there anymore, something's broken. And I remember the software that was used for salaries went through at least 2 layers of approvals. So something's wrong, and that needs to be changed.
No question. I mean, we have that with, if you look since the pandemic, one of the worst things that happened to us as legislators was when the pandemic happened, our unemployment, because of all the things we went through with people not working and what have you. But we had no real response to those people. And that was a big button back when Hogan was still in office. But my office is still getting calls, repeat calls from somebody saying, I can't get my money I'm due. I can't collect it. And you say, what did we fix? Because that's not necessarily my office's job. That should be the exception. That when they start calling a department that they're supposed to call for help, and what happens in a lot of the cases, we have some very good people. I don't mean to do this, but we do have some very good people that get back and respond. But that's not always the case, because they sit back and they say, well, I called you Saturday. You didn't recognize the number. You didn't answer it. So I did call you. I tried to do my job. So they're being forced to do it, but we're not doing that. And then what we've done with the Department of Labor, and I hope we can pull this off. I didn't vote for the bill, but it was that paid time leave where we split the pay.
Right.
Instead of sending that and maybe going to like an AFLAC, which already does that, pretty much what we want to do, we decided we wanted to reinvent that wheel. So now the Department of Labor is going out and they're going to take responsibility for writing that software, implementing that software, and policing that software. That's never a good idea in my world. You know, you do need checks and balances, but we don't, as a government, do those things typically well. That's not what we should be doing. That's something we should rely on business. But when we do these contracts with other businesses, we end up not following the proper procedures. We end up getting shortchanged, and then we end up settling for far less. And all that does is cost taxpayers money. And that's that's difficult to keep looking at.
I agree. When I was at Department of Labor when pandemic hit and this surge of unemployment claims hit, and they rolled out simultaneously at the same time that beacon system that wasn't completely tested. Came to the point where they had to pull the trigger. I think September 30th was a deadline because I think the feds were going to pull back money or something to that effect. So they had to go live, and they went live, and I blame most of that on the software and the software development, and not necessarily the people behind it. But you multiply that with the amount of claims that came in, and that was the perfect storm of disaster.
Oh, yeah.
And with the same thing with the Family Act, if the software is developed in-house, I wish you luck. I wish him luck.
Well, we could have gone to get a software piece. Somebody who's actually doing it, that's working, and it's been working for years. We could have got that and then maybe enhanced it. But we're going to go out and develop it all. And my back life, I was a computer guy. I was a programmer. I was a software analyst. And I look at that stuff. And one of the things we talked about still in government, one of the greatest part-time of the year for a salesperson or a representative for a computer company or whatever software company is towards the end of the year, because we have this mad rush to spend money we haven't spent. And you sit there and say, so, you'd sit down, it'd be your biggest month of the year, December, if you could deliver it. And you sit down and say, why? We haven't used it. We haven't done it. So those are big issues that we need to take a look at. And contrary to what people say, we do need a businessman running this. We need somebody to look at the dollars and cents and say, Clay, I really think you're a great guy. I need you to do this. But you know what? You're coming up short. We need to rethink that.
Right.
And sometimes government gets in a position where they start promising things they can't possibly deliver, and they want to blame it on the lack of personnel. Well, when I look at that, I said, maybe we're over promising stuff. Maybe we need to get there at some point, but let's slow down and get there when we can. And you have to start saying, how does this stuff happen? And why do we continue to let it go? Mandates are a killer.
Yeah. The formulas, I get why the formulas were set up in the first place. It's to relieve decision makers of responsibility of the cost of things going forward. But we're gonna bury ourselves under our own weight if something isn't done with that. I think the governor has said something to the effect of Kerwin, we have to slow it down or spread it out over more years. But if we get our hands on that, and I've heard from different commissioners and such here on the shore, it's going to bury these counties. I don't know what we're going to do, but taxes, I think, is going to be the result of what they're going to do. But
arguably, Kerwin was put together quickly. One of the things that puzzles you have to be the fact that we gave educators and we gave people that were trying to teach our children, we said, here's a wish list. Go out and make your wish list. Don't worry about cost. And you sit down and say, how rational was that? Why would we do that and sit back and say, sure, whatever you want, you put it together, we'll find a way to fund it. Well, we're finding out, and we've known this, we're finding out that we can't fund it. It's just not happening. When you start looking at what he's saying now, the backtracking, and if you look over the history of Kerwin right now, and you look at the number of schools we have that were top schools, they've diminished. And maybe in their grand scheme of things, they'll grow back to it. But you have to say that why weren't we actually adding the dollars and cents to this? When you need something for your business, let's say you own a farm, you don't go out and buy the 10 biggest things you don't need that you want. You sit back and say,
Right.
well, I got 150 acres. I need a machine this big to do that. I need this one. I don't go out and buy the one I need to do 300 acres, hoping I'll grow. I have to
Right.
grow first. So it's kind of, you have to go back. And I asked, we had a meeting a long time ago with our superintendents, and I asked, why wouldn't you have looked at how you're going to do this? Take Kent County. Kent County is getting buried. I mean, they cannot possibly do this without major tax increases or whatever, however they're going to accommodate it. And you say, why didn't the superintendent say, what's with the county? Is the county going to be able to support this? And the county would have told you, no, we can't. We need to be a little bit more realistic about what we want. We have to go back and address it and how we're going to do that. But we never did that. We just gave a group of people, said, go out and do what you want.
I
That's
was
where
shocked. I was shocked to learn we had a conversation with Commissioner Fithian that Kent County is considered one of the wealthy counties based on some calculation, and they have to come up with 50% of the
Yep.
cost of construction and programs. I I'm from Kent County originally, and I was shocked to hear that.
Well, Kent County is actually one of the poorest schools, but one of the wealthiest as far as people got a lot of great property up there and people moving from out of state. And they're not in there necessarily doing business every day, spending it. Plus, it's
Right.
tough to get to. I mean, Kent County is in a unique situation. You can't get there from here sometimes. And we see
Yeah.
that up the 301 corridor. Why isn't Route 301 the Glen Burnie? Why isn't that Glen Burnie?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. You don't go there and you can't get there. It's harder, it's more difficult. And we fought this as a county commissioner. The people didn't want growth, said, just go up 301. Well, when you do that, they don't want growth there either. But you'd sit back and say, well, first of all, I can't get there from here, And you say that if I'm going to start a business, that's not necessarily where I'm going to start a business. And as
Right.
you look at if you look at our platform in in the state right now, when you look at taxes, you can't afford to be here. The Department of Labor comes into our committee a lot. That's one of the things we deal with highly. And we sat back and I had one of our guys ask the question. And he said, who does the Department of Labor work for? Do you only work for the employee? Oh, no, we work for the businesses. I said, no, you don't. I've not faced a bill where we said, hey, you know what? We're going to give a business a major break here. All we have done is sat back and they can afford it. They can afford it. And we may as well touch on this other thing that we're being faced with right now. Governor Moore came up with this idea that he wants to sell liquor in grocery stores. And one of the things nobody understands, and the grocers will fight this, they'll say we have a headquarters. Not one of these major grocery stores, from Giant to Safeway, not one of them are headquartered in Maryland. We do have a headquarters of some sort for Giant Foods, but
Right.
it's not headquartered here. So you want to build the business in Maryland. That's what he said, but yet you want to fund these companies that are out of our state. That doesn't make sense. Package stores, if you look at how it's set up, and again, a lot of people sit back and say, but I want the convenience. I said, but there's more to it than that. We have a 3-tiered system. And when you look at that 3-tiered system, you have to kind of adhere to that because that's what our system is built on. And I know we have that. We do some of it in Talbot County because that was grandfathered, and that may work in Talbot County. But if you're thinking about changing the overall system, now you got a whole lot of problems. And you were a young kid once. I was a young kid once. And I know, and I don't want to admit this publicly, but I know I walked into the A&P and grabbed a carton of chocolate milk a few times and drank it. And when you go into these stores, because I've been into the other states, they have one person out there policing this, if you will.
Yeah.
And if you don't think a kid can find a way to do that, and I think our chairman made a comment on our committee. He said the last thing we need in some parts of this state, in some counties, is the ability to get alcohol more easily and more convenient for people. It's still a drug. It's still a problem in this state. And I don't know that that's the proper way to do it. It's not something I will support. And I love to talk about it, but it's a very difficult thing for us to do.
Because you look at a lot of grocery stores now, and most of the checkout lines are self-checkout. And I always ask the question, who's going to check the IDs? Who is going to hold the liquor license? Who is going to, all the things that are traditionally done And then you look at the smaller businesses like Baker's Liquors here on Ken Island, Pip's Liquors up in Chestertown. They sponsor little league teams and charitable things locally. I don't think, and I don't want to, I'm just picking a corporation out of the air. Safeway is going to sponsor the local baseball team or check IDs the way Baker's Liquors would, because there's some person there that has a license at risk and doesn't
Mhm.
want to lose it. So I agree with you that it's riddled with problems.
They want to pose that as job creation, and it's not, because if you look at a liquor store, a package store, a local package store in Queen Anne's County, especially, we have package stores. At least they're attached almost to the grocery store. They're in the same area, real close, and that's by design. So you'll lose those. There's other counties that are a little bit run differently. But when you start looking at the number of people that my package store employs, maybe 10 or 12. If you look at a grocery store, they got to cover with one person for one shift. So those numbers, and that person typically can be drawn away from that, and that's where the problems come in. But there's a lot to it. It is a big thing. We've had this fight back for years now, so we'll try to accomplish that.
So between that and the Family Act and the budget, you got your hands full this year, sir.
Well, it's bigger than that because we still have our mainstays. I mean, if you look at it, we're pretty much right on immigration. Immigration needs to be fixed, and it hasn't been fixed over years. Blame it on whoever, but the problem is, and now we have to fix it because that's what we're doing now. Most people understand it's an issue, whether you agree with illegal, legal, whatever, but it has to be fixed right now. And I'm hoping they can do that. We saw that the last time when President Trump was elected. We were going to fix Obamacare, and we didn't. So we need to do this. I think that's kind of what part of the mandate. But we're right on crime. Crime is just totally out of control in this state. We have a package that we're supporting as a delegation about juvenile justice. You've seen the problems with that. You've seen what all the things we said would happen are coming true. They're just getting younger kids to commit crimes. You've seen it. You see the lack of accountability. You can walk in most any store and steal less than $1,500 and not get prosecuted. That's crazy. Even in our outlets, you see it every week on Facebook. Do you know this person? And you've seen that. And then the violent offenders, everybody's up in arms about all the pardons and all that stuff. If you rape and beat and murder a child, I'm not sure you should ever get out of prison, but we seem to think that's okay now. We need to tighten that up and let people understand that we got your back. And I think that's something we keep pushing for. And, we can argue on some of these points, but these are real issues and they don't really hit home until you know somebody. And that's like most everything. Cancer was never a big issue when I was a kid because we didn't know anybody with cancer. Now it's everywhere. So these are the things we're focusing on. And I think as a party, as a group, that's what we're trying to do. The House and the Senate are working extremely well together. I'm really proud of our district. I'll say this online real quick. I think I have another minute or two. Delegate Jacobs is the ranking member on environment and transportation. That means that he is the guy that the Democrats will pull in the back room when we have meetings and we get to talk about some of the bills that are questionable, what have you. Delegate Greist is the ranking member on appropriations. I'm the ranking member on economic matters, and Senator Hershey is the minority leader. That says a lot about our district. We are very effective. We work well together. We have a great relationship, and you've heard us. If you've ever been to one of our times when we're together, we're not only coworkers. We're all friends. We will do things together, and we all understand it. And we strive to get our legislation passed as a team, not just as a body. And we're probably one of the most well-liked over there just because we are congenial, but we are firm and we are stand-up people.
That's why they call it 36.
Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah,
there are some that may question that, but we're all good people, I think. So
and you are. It's an Eastern Shore thing,
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, we're all good Eastern Shore is a great place. It's a beautiful place. I love it. I've made it my home for me and my family, and it's just great. So my business.
Well, we want to have you back if you have time during session to come on for a few minutes to keep us up to date as to what's going on. If not after session, give us a recap. We'd love to have you back on, Steve, and I appreciate you for being here today.
I love it. It's a passion. It really is. And hopefully that comes out when we talk to you all. But I appreciate being on here and thank you. And God bless. We're only missing one person out of this threesome. So
that made me look at the clock on the wall. Steve, it's time to say Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick, wherever you are. Steve, it was a pleasure. Would like to have you back.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Have a good New Year.
Thank you,
Everybody.
Steve.
Thank you. All right.